Ready to roll?
We are.
All right, well, seeing a quorum of the Climate Action Subcommittee, I'll call this meeting to order at 4:02 PM. And ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Okrepke.
Here.
Councilmember Benuelos.
Here.
And Chair Fleming.
Here, thank you. So we're about to move on to we'll skip item 2. Item 3, approval of minutes. How do we proceed in approving minutes when a quorum is unable to be met to satisfy the requirement?
My understanding from the city clerk is that as long as the new subcommittee members have reviewed the recording, they can vote on the minutes.
Okay, okay, all right. So why don't we ask if there's any changes or amendments? Okay, so we'll adopt them. Do we need to take public comment? Okay, can I let's see.
Oh, yes. If you'd like to make public comment on item 3, approval of minutes. I'm seeing them. Chair
Okay,
Fleming.
great. All right, we'll adopt those as written. Public comment on non-agenda matters.
Yes, please.
I'm going to give you just one moment to pull up the timer.
That's the most important part of public comment.
Don't sell yourself short.
My apologies, you all can't see this well. My name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. I'm not bowing to the powers that be. I'm just leaning over to show you a map, a park equity study map that we put together 10 years ago. This is commissioned geographic information specialist put this together. It was the second in a series. We're doing another one right now. And you could actually look at tree equity as another part of park equity. And the reason why we put this together, because it shows that the areas where I'm from in Roseland have the highest concentration of low-income households throughout the city in relation to park access. We have the least park access. We have the highest proportion of elderly people and young people too, people under 20. And we've got the highest proportion of people of color, of all kinds of different backgrounds over there in that area. So now I'm going to sit down and just look across at you and basically point out that for decades, we've been over there in Roseland trying to save the trees that we have. And this is more of a dilemma than you might imagine, because every project that comes forward wants to take trees out. And former Santa Rosa City Councilwoman Marsha Vos Dupre championed an effort to have Burbank Avenue declared a scenic road. The only one on West Side Santa Rosa at the time. All of the scenic stuff apparently is just over to the east. But at that time, that Burbank Avenue had a tree canopy. It made what we call a tree tunnel. It was so beautiful to get on that street and then look down it. It's like McDonald, well, actually more like Humboldt Street with that tree canopy and that beautiful tree tunnel. That's been destroyed. School district came in afterwards and they're a kingdom above all the rest. They can do whatever they want. Then the county came in, they did some more, taking trees out for the path to the school. And then the city has been doing things out there. So I bring this up because it appears that you folks are taking this seriously, that this climate adaptation committee has come together because you're going to embrace its mission and say to the greater public and your employees at city, the trees are important and there should be a tree replacement program for all those taken out. The mitigations should actually be better and bigger than what was taken out. The example that the city doesn't do that is right here at Courthouse Square. Right there, they took out all those nice big redwoods and now we got that, whatever we got there. The main point of all of this now as we get down to the end of my time today is please remember, nothing's gotten better over in these areas in regards to equity, especially in regards to parks and trees. We'll keep trying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Park equity, keep that thought in mind.
Do we have any more public comments on those agenda matters?
Better jump up now if you want to talk.
All right. We'll move on to item 5, department reports.
Thank you, Chair Fleming, and welcome to the new members of the subcommittee. My name is Peter Martin. I'm the Deputy Director of Water Resources. I do have one good news announcement update from department reports. I wanted to note that the city participated in the Sonoma Clean Power's heat pump water heater electrification program at the end of last year. This program is available to local government and K through 12 operated public facilities that are within Sonoma Clean Power's service territory. And ultimately, it provides turnkey services for installation and replacement of gas water heaters with all electric heat pump water heaters. The water department and general funded facilities participated in the program and assessed many properties across the entire city. Ultimately, we selected over 17 different public and operational facilities to replace the water heaters. And the total amount of funding that was free for the installation was over $245,000. So the projects over the life will result in 80,000 therms of gas, natural gas not being utilized by our operations, and instead being replaced with 100% renewable electricity provided under the Evergreen portfolio, which the city has elected to participate in. So this is all, of course, in alignment with our municipal climate action plan, which was adopted in 2013, that seeks to achieve greenhouse gas reductions in our municipal operations. So good news there. That's the end of my report.
All right. And you also have item number 6.
Okay, great.
Do
So
we have to take any public comment on that?
Yeah.
We do, okay. Would anybody like to comment on our report? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank
you. All right, item number 6,
Okay,
new
so-
business.
all right, great, thank you, Chair Fleming. Item number 6.1 is trees, existing codes, policies, and procedures. And presenting today will be Jessica Jones, Deputy Director of Planning, Cleve Gurney, Deputy Director, Engineering and Development Services, and Jen Santos, Parks Deputy Director. Give me one moment and I'll pull up the presentation.
And could you say the names louder of the Deputy Director of Extra Service?
Sorry.
Deputy Director of Engineering
Engineering
Development Services.
Okay, and your name is?
Cleve Gurney.
Nice, thank you, sir.
It's there, Michelle. Sorry.
All right. All right, good afternoon, Chair Fleming and council members, or committee members, I guess I should say. I'm Jessica Jones. I'm Deputy Director of Planning. So as mentioned with me is Cleve Gurney, Deputy Director of our Engineering and Development Services, and Jen Santos, Deputy Director of Parks. So we are going to be going over talking about trees in general, going over our existing codes and policies, which I'll be talking about our existing tree ordinance, mitigation that's required for removal of trees and the permitting requirements, and then a little bit about the policies that are in our draft general plan moving forward. And then I'll hand it over to Cleve, who's going to talk about street trees, and then Jen will finish up talking about parks and recreation responsibilities. So our existing municipal code in chapter 17-24 talks about trees and the permitting requirements for the removal of trees, whether that is related to just an individual property owner who wants to remove a tree or tree removal through a proposed project. So the current code was adopted in 1990. It's been quite some time since it was last updated. But the purpose really at that time when it was developed and still today is to ensure the health and safety and general welfare related to trees, and address regulations for removal of trees when that is necessary, and making sure that our heritage trees are protected. So permits are required to remove trees. And so there's two permit categories. The first is when no development is proposed. And so that would be, any property owner who wants to remove a tree, permits are required if it is a heritage tree. There are exceptions within our code for when a permit is not required. And really that's only for our residential areas. Unless it is a heritage tree, the property owners don't need to get a permit. Otherwise, unless it is specifically exempt, a permit is required for tree removal. And there are fees associated with that. The permit is an over-the-counter process, and the planners review that. Typically, if it is not clear why the tree needs to be removed, we may require an arborist report to demonstrate the health of the tree, or if there's a hazardous condition. The second category is for proposed development. And so we don't require a separate tree permit when there's proposed development. We review it through that development process, whether it's through an entitlement process or the building permit process. With both of these, mitigation is required, and it's typically based on the diameter of the trunk that is being removed. And it's usually 1 tree per 6 inches of tree that is being removed. As I mentioned, there are exemptions, kind of already went over this. We also require permits if there is trimming, depending on the amount of trimming. If it is trimming that would alter or cause problems to the tree, we require permits for that to ensure that the tree remains in good health. And if the tree needs to be removed because of a hazardous situation, that is something that we do more expeditiously. Most of the trees, I mentioned it's over the counter, we do take the permits in and it gets reviewed by a planner. So it typically takes a couple weeks to get that reviewed. When we're dealing with a hazardous situation, it is an over the counter. And we do require arborist reports demonstrating why the tree is in imminent danger of either falling down or causing damage to a property. Again, I've already kind of mentioned this. So mitigation and protection. So we do require that one tree for every 6 inches. There is an option to do an in lieu payment, which is $100 per tree. And that goes towards a tree replacement fund, which I think Jen might be talking about. If somebody removes a tree without a permit, that tree replacement goes up to 4 trees per every 6 inches of tree removal. We also require tree protection for projects that are going in. So if it is a development project, and we do our best to work with applicants to design a project to save as many trees as we can't always save all the trees. And so in the instance where we are trying to save trees that are going to be close to whatever the development is, we do require specific tree protections. And generally that comes from an arborist report that outlines the protection requirements. And those are included as conditions of approval or mitigation, as the case may be. So I mentioned the general plan. So we've got, as you all know, we've got a new general plan moving forward. Included in that are very specific policies related to trees. I'm happy to go over them specifically, but we have a main policy that are supported by numerous actions. The policy specifically regarding trees is to support the preservation and restoration of natural landscapes, to reduce the heat island effect, improve air quality, and improve community health. And then there's numerous actions related to tree replacement, canopies, and increasing the city's work when it comes to tree mitigation. So this will be coming forward to council early this spring for adoption. And then the city will get started on ensuring that we move forward on those actions. So I'll hand it over to street trees.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Cleve Gurney, Deputy Director of Development Services. So we're really the engineering division of ED. So when my team really gets involved with trees is when it's a street tree, when it's within the public right of way. So in our city code, chapter 17-24 to 20, the definition of a street tree is, it gives a definition based off the diameter, the trunk circumference. But I think it's easier to just understand that whenever there's a tree in a planter strip, in a tree well, or directly behind the sidewalk, within the public right of way, then that's really the definition of a street tree. So in our city code, but then also the California Streets and Highway Code, it defines the responsibility of who has to maintain, repair any sidewalk, trim any of the tree limbs that are obstructing those pedestrian corridors. That's all defined in the Streets and Highway Code listed there, and our city code. On any private developments that come in either with an entitlement or a building permit, we take a look at the type of project, and we condition the project to either replace any street trees that they're removing because of a utility conflict, or to plant new trees if they're missing trees from the planter strip along the edge. Then in our street design and construction standards, every city road has a defined roadway width, planter strip width, and sidewalk width. And so within those design standards, we're telling each development, you're building that road or that frontage to that standard, and you have to put in this planter strip or tree well. And we have landscaping standards also that tell the type of trees, the placing of the trees, like how far apart they have to be, the distances from curb cuts for like a driveway, so someone isn't hitting a tree when they're pulling into their driveway, or the tree's not obstructing their vision if they're pulling out of the driveway and someone's walking in the sidewalk. So the responsibilities of street trees would be all on the property owner that's abutting that planter strip or that tree well. So in getting into some of the conflicts that we see around the city of street trees impacting the public right of way, and the big three that we really get are conflicts to drainage, to ADA compliance, and to pavement failure. So as you can see in the pictures there, we have a tree behind a sidewalk and it's overgrown, uplifting the sidewalk. A pedestrian can fall, tripping over that sidewalk, or someone can't even cross through that corridor because it's too uplifted. So that's a liability on the property owner, but also as a city, we want that pedestrian corridor to be open. So if that property owner comes in with a building permit or a development proposal, we'll ask them, this is your responsibility, please upgrade, trim the tree back, or fix with an asphalt patch, or bulb out the sidewalk somehow. Then there's those other two pictures, you can see it's uplifting the asphalt pavement. So then the gutter is being affected, and it's creating a high point or a low point. So in like the bottom right picture, you can see there's ponding there. So when ponding during a heavy storm event, you get water that's going into the travel lane. That's hazardous because cars are going and hitting water. They're either splashing pedestrians or they're skidding out because the tires are going into that surface. Then the top right with that tree uplifting is creating a high point. So it's changing the actual drainage boundaries of that corridor. So you have systems that are designed to take more flows, or some systems that are not designed to take those certain flows. So these are just some of the impacts that we'd see from street trees that are not maintained properly, or street trees that were planted not according to that corridor that they're supposed to be. Next slide. Then these are just some strategic like solutions that we've been trying to implement. A lot of them happen downtown where we have smaller tree wells or overgrown trees. So we ask the property owner really to go through all these solutions. Like, can you grind the roots down without affecting the health of the tree? Can you widen the tree well so that the tree can still continue to grow but not affect the sidewalk or uplift the curb and gutter? Can you bow the curb out but without affecting the drainage patterns? And also meandering the sidewalk further onto the property owner's site, or if it's still the public right of way, to meander it just closer towards the property. So we try all these different solutions to try to protect the tree. We don't want, then that's not our number one goal. That's not our first step, is just remove the tree. No, we want them to go through this analysis before we give them over to the Rec and Parks Department, who has the final say. They have to, the property owner has to pull a street tree removal permit. So once we see an impact or a conflict, because they come into engineering for an encroachment permit, we tell them you have to pull this permit, please work with the Rec and Parks Department, and then we work towards a solution. So I'll hand it over to Jen now.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Cleve. And good afternoon, Chair Fleming and committee members. And as to see you in person, our new council member, Bob Wells, thank you. I have essentially 4 areas where the Recreation and Parks Department gets involved with trees throughout the city that we'll talk about. So as you've heard before, we also are involved in the park planning section with plan review. So we're like a second set of eyes, looking for potential impacts to existing trees and kind of assisting the planning team who's ultimately making the information that back to the potential developer or somebody who has an existing property who wants to make changes. So we get involved in plan review in that way, and we require that the developer plant street trees, as you've heard already, and we make sure that they have the current street tree list. We have a whole plethora of information about why trees are important, and here's the street tree list, and if you need an accommodation, we need to hear from you. We also work with emergent trees in the right-of-way through our maintenance division, and we provide maintenance to all the city's trees and tree planting. Next slide. Let's circle in the right direction here. Thank you. This is so much better. So, so the plan review I already mentioned, and you've heard from Jess a little bit about that, and Cleve. The Parks Department is another part of that review. We make sure that the street tree requirement is included, and we look at ways to help the future developer ensure that existing trees remain as much as possible. We will help with the assistance of looking at heritage trees, and we will also provide future information on the future maintenance of the trees, because as Cleve mentioned, most of the trees in the city, street trees, are the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. And so I want to talk about street trees. How do we get involved in street trees? The city code 13.32010 is we hand that out on a daily basis to folks that call us. We get a ton of calls with people requesting tree removal for a variety of reasons. And so this is where we hand them the code, reminding it a lot of times this is the first time they're hearing this, the tree out in front of their house is their responsibility to maintain and upkeep. So oftentimes they're calling the city to have us come and maintain the tree or remove it. They can get a street tree permit from us. It's free. They just need to tell us, where it's located, what's going on, what's happening in, and then our park maintenance staff, we've got a member here, will go out and evaluate the tree and make a determination based on the health of the tree and the safety of the space. And we'll either provide an approval or a denial permit. And we usually tell people up front when they call, we are really, our goal is to protect trees in the city. So knowing that so that they upfront understand that our main goal is to protect existing trees and not to remove trees that are healthy growing and providing an ample amount of shade and are not creating a safety issue. And then we oftentimes have people calling and saying, my neighbor removed a tree. Please, you need to come out. And so we'll refer those back to the planning and economic development team through code enforcement as needed. So we're not the enforcement branch, but we get a lot of those calls. We just send them over to planning and economic development. Next slide. And then, of course, we are the ones 24/7 out in the roadway over the last storms. And any storm, you'll see parks maintenance teams responding to trees down all over the city. We have the standby call on all the time, so just in case. And it's our responsibility. So even if it's on private property, as long as it falls in the street or the sidewalk or anything like that, it's going to block the right of way. We're out there 24/7 removing those and clearing the right of way is our responsibility for that. And there are some trees that are tricky that are out there. So we also have contracted tree services. They get tangled up in wires a lot and can become very dangerous for our own crews. And so we call in experts that are used to dealing with tricky situations when we need it, or if we're overwhelmed. There are some storms where there's so many trees. We also need help in that direction sometimes. But we do have a huge staff that can go out and that's ready. And we often, ahead of storms, will prepare a secondary crew, third crew to be ready and available that evening if the first crew cannot handle. So we try to prepare in advance and really get to all the trees in a storm event immediately. Next slide. And so along with, how do we provide that positive side of trees and getting trees planted and maintained. So when we look at a city tree for us, when we're thinking about maintaining the city's infrastructure, excuse me. I knew I should have brought some water. Sorry.
There's some water here.
I'm okay. Thank you. Sorry. So city tree is like any city property. This property, city hall, parks, any city property are things that we'll respond to for planting, removal, anything like that. We're maintaining the trees here at this building, at the buildings across the city. There's certain places like the water department is an enterprise fund, so they have their own funding for maintenance of that, but the general fund and locations in the city are the places we are maintaining and planting new trees. Thank you, sorry.
Rescue.
All right, so then we are also providing the annual maintenance all across the city for all tree types. And again, we do have a contracted service. We do have limits with our equipment and things. So if we have very tall trees or very unusual trees or things that might become unsafe for our staff, we will call contracted service as needed or hire, bring on equipment to help us with that. You can see from the image there where we do not shy away from large projects. The large tree that came down that was Doyle, I think, yeah, Doyle. We take care of that as well. The other fantastic thing we do is we plant hundreds of trees a year all across the city, but especially in our parks. We have a Park a Month program, and we plant hundreds of trees. We plant trees every month in our parks somewhere. It's a really positive experience. We have a picture, we have lots of pictures of folks out there, but this is a monthly drop in and volunteer. We have our parks set for the year. But we do have some tree planting opportunities usually at each of those. And then of course at our Arbor Day celebration in March, which will be at Galvin Park this year, March 8th. And so we'll be planting nearly 100 trees at Galvin Park as well. So we really try to stay busy and try to plant as many trees and replace trees when they do fall. The other thing we're noticing is with climate change, we are noticing that how the city has irrigated trees in the past is with lawn. So the trees don't have a separate irrigation controller to the lawn. So when we turn down the irrigation in a drought scenario to the lawn, we are also turning down the irrigation to the trees. And we've seen increased mortality to trees when we do that. So we are also looking at ways of providing duplicate irrigation or, side-by-side irrigation systems so the trees can still maintain and provide the good value they do, and we can turn back the lawn a little bit during droughts when we have those. And again, we have a tree replacement program where we do try to replace as many trees as possible when they fall, especially in our parks or cities, depending, city buildings, as when we can get to those. And those are done by our park maintenance team. We also maintain the Tree City USA designation for the city, and we do that by letting the Tree City USA know how many trees we planted and what sort of maintenance we provide to trees and how the city is doing that. And we've been doing that, I think, like 49. It's an amazing. We've been able to keep that continuous tree designation, City USA designation for years. And we're really proud of that. And, one of the ways that, like Jess mentioned, that we fund these is that tree replacement program. So if folks are contributing to the tree replacement program, those are funds the parks team can use to go and plant more trees. We're looking at it now for also making sure we can provide appropriate irrigation, that we're not just planting trees that in 5-10 years are going to die because we can't provide them enough water and care. So I think that is, yes. So that concludes that portion. And I'll just say for the team here, you can see how we all really work together and we're really integrated in the way that we work with trees in the city with the goal of protecting trees that we have because they provide such amazing canopy and take so long to grow. So. Thank you.
All right. First, we'll see if either of our new climate subcommittee members have any questions for the public. We have Caroline Banuelos and Jeff Okrepke joining us. I'm sure you know them both. Who would like to go first?
I just have really one question about the street trees. And I think it was, I don't know which slide this was, but it's the one about street tree impacts. Because it's something I think we see a lot, the photo of the tree where all the sidewalk is coming up and the roots, I know the roots are. So I understand that the owner, residential owner is responsible for the tree. And then you mentioned that we asked them to do all, clippings and all kinds of things that they could do to mitigate it. But then what about the sidewalk? How is that resolved?
Yeah, so we could either widen, so pull the pavement back closer towards the curb and try to maintain so a 4-foot minimum is required for ADA requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can widen almost the pervious portion so that the tree can still maintain its health and the roots are not being damaged, then we would do that. But in this case, like specifically, that sidewalk is lifted up several inches. So they would either have to bulb out the sidewalk, but we would have to look at like the radius of the driveway apron, and I believe that's an alley to the right of the tree as well. So in this situation, you're gonna have to do something with the actual curb alignment if you want to be able to keep that tree in that location, I believe. Unless an arborist went out there and said you grind down the roots however many inches without jeopardizing the health of the tree or the safety of the residents nearby it.
So the goal is still always going to be to save the tree.
Yes.
It's just trying to figure out what to do about the sidewalk. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I think that was the main question I had for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. On slide 4, exemptions, it says removal or alteration of any tree necessitated by a hazardous or dangerous condition which requires immediate action to protect life and property. How is that defined?
How is it defined, like how we determine if it's truly a hazard? So we require an arborist report to demonstrate that whatever the situation is, that the tree is either in imminent danger of falling or destroying property, but they have to, an arborist has to demonstrate that to us before we can.
So it's only by falling.
No, it doesn't have to be by falling. There could be other situations. It depends on the situation, what the hazard might be.
Okay, so the reason why I asked this is in a vacuum, this is all great. I love all of this. However, we're living in different times and my biggest concern is with the new wildland urban interface, with the new state fire marshals, fire severity zones coming. And that there's people that won't be able to protect their homes without vegetation management and wildfire mitigation. And part of that is going to be removal of trees. Whether or not we should have developed in some of those areas, that bell can't be unrung.
Right.
We've got to adapt and move forward. But my concern is there's a large focus on what's called zone 0, which is nothing 0 to 5 feet except for like shrubs basically. And then from 5 to 30, nothing that it can be ignited. And so we're looking at people that are trying to protect their homes and everything that they hold dear, and they want to remove a tree that may be completely safe in terms of its root structure, may be completely safe in terms of its health, but is hanging over their house. What remedies are there for those individuals?
Yeah, so in those situations, so when we talk about hazardous conditions, those are usually ones that come in and it's an imminent danger of causing an issue. What you're talking about is something that would come in during a normal permit process. And in that situation, we very likely would route it out to our fire department to get their input on it as well. And if it is found based on the information provided by the applicant through an arborist report and also in talking with our fire department, that, it is in a situation where it could cause a hazardous situation and a fire, then likely the city would approve the removal. But there would be mitigation as part of that.
Okay. My concern is that an arborist in the fire department will have different definitions of hazardous versus nationwide insurance. Who is going to go to Google Maps and see an oak tree overhanging half of a house and say no. So I know at the state level, legislation is being moved forward, using some of these ideas to help with the insurance crisis that we're in and are going to face. It's going to get more severe. And so I'm wondering what we can do to not completely gut all of this, but also find an avenue for those that want to protect themselves and what they have.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that we've had an issue where we've had to deal with that as of yet, but I think you're right. Probably it's coming. And so something that we'll need to look at, figure out how we're going to address.
That'd be great. So now from before fire to after fire, I love all the tree plantings that go on, but I know in fire affected areas, street trees were absolutely the last thing on anybody's mind because they weren't required in a rebuild. So if you go up into Fountain Grove, if you go into Hidden Valley, Coffee Park, there's like no street trees at all. Is there anything that we can do as a city to help with planting of street trees?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean,
Thank you.
I know it's hard because I do this. We do the same thing, right? We're driving around and I'm like, oh, but right now we're relying on code enforcement as the enforcement branch to require trees. But we did have a temporary reprieve for that because especially in the Tudsnun's fire, there was so much immediate tragedy and none of us knew exactly how to address such a huge tragedy. So we didn't want to have people in non-compliance at that point, but it would really be something we'd probably have to look at with our code enforcement team on how can we proactively address that? Because right now it's a reaction where a neighbor calls in and says, hey, my neighbor hasn't planted their street tree.
Right,
So-
and my thing is that since there has been an exemption, right, like the code enforcement idea, just that's the one where, you know,
It's tough.
I'd like to see some way for us to help facilitate the planting of those or an education on how to take care of them so that they grow and just don't die there if you don't water them. Because it, you know, to everything that you've said before, it does contribute so much to, you know, I mean, just the temperature outside of your home, if you walk out your front door, you know, that's the most immediate thing. And then everything else, right? Street calming, you know, and everything like that. So if there's opportunities, I don't know if there's grant funding at the state level or, you know, whatever it might be, I'd like to see, you know, if there's opportunities out there. I'm done. Sorry.
Yeah, I do wonder to, Councilmember Okrepke's point, if there isn't something like more carrot oriented than stick oriented we could do, like, we do have a park a month where we plant trees. We have a street a month, maybe like rotate between Coffee Park and Fountain Grove, or maybe the neighbors bring their own trees, but they all gather together and then people, you know, there's some sort of energy or enthusiasm built around planting street trees, just something to sort of get the ball rolling in those areas. My question was around tree health. I know we've had some, I think it was some sort of beetle. I'm not an arborist or anything, but do you know what I'm talking about? The oak, is it an oak beetle or boar beetle? Somebody say what it is? Help me out here, y'all.
Or beetle.
A boar beetle, thank you, Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland, we got it. Okay, so the boar beetle, I'm just wondering, do we have folks on staff who are monitoring our trees for general population health?
We have folks on staff that are generally monitoring for that. We've had specialized training in that. So anytime training comes out and understanding how to deal with that, we utilize that training and apply it internally to all of the trees from the parks maintenance perspective, all those trees at here, City Hall, parks. So we monitor and know how to deal with that. It's not easy once it's taken hold. So the idea is to have preventative maintenance on that.
I'll just add my support to those efforts. I was reading this Bill Bryson book about him walking the Appalachian Trail, and it was kind of just an example for anybody who's read this book. I can't remember the title. It's a really interesting book, but the point of his book was really he wanted to talk about all these different things that had phenomena across the United States. And one of them he talked about, I can't remember the type of tree that it was, but it was about this one species of tree that just collapsed basically like overnight, you know, and not in this century, but we just lost tons and tons of trees and it could.
American chestnut?
Or the,
chestnut. And it's just, it can happen so quickly. So, you know, any support y'all need for this sort of monitoring to get in there before we, you know, I have nightmares about us losing our oak canopy and sort of what makes Santa Rosa, Santa Rosa. With that, we will close and go on to public comment, which I will let our clerk facilitate.
Yes, if you'd like to make a public comment on this item, please raise your hand.
Yes. I'm gonna come up here just so it helps me to see my notes. My name's Glenn McLean. I live at 13th Street in the McDonald District. And I support your Category 1 call for an arborist report on cutting heritage trees, but that comes with a warning. This week, a 100-foot tall heritage redwood was cut down from my neighbor's backyard 3 doors from me. My husband and I sent letters in opposition. An arborist report said it was a diseased tree. We pointed out it was clearly healthy and permitters should ask if the arborist was also the tree cutter who would profit from the cutting. Indeed, the tree cutter and the arborist were the same. An amended report admitted the tree was healthy, but found other reasons to cut it. The city needs to require arborist reports that are independent of the tree cutters. The second problem, to appeal the approval of that amended permit would have cost us $1,025. That amounts to an unconscionable fee. Its only effect is to silence good neighborhood appeals, which may include information staff does not have and the onerous appeal serves to stifle speech. The third problem, on page 8 of your report, which cites street tree impacts, that redwood tree upending the sidewalk in the picture is a half a block from my house. The homeowner got a city letter over a year ago saying basically, cut the tree, fix the sidewalk, and imposed significant fines. He posted a sign asking neighbors for help to save the tree. We got together with him, a city planner, an engineer. We asked if, as an alternative, the city could rip out the cement and the homeowner could create a bump out or something similar to save the tree and solve the issue. They were amenable. My husband and I also went so far as to get a contractor estimate for our neighbor on the cost of bump out work that would be ADA compliant. The price was about $12,000. But the neighbor was overwhelmed by the process and didn't act. So a year later, the city is now back again saying, cut the tree, fix the sidewalk. He's given up. He's in the permit process to cut this beautiful redwood tree. Your presentation talks about the benefit of bowing curbs out. That's great. The first response by the city needs to be proactive to help homeowners protect the trees, as your policy suggests, instead of ordering them to cut it down and imposing fines. That's not really what's happening. So this solution page is very nice, but it's not what I'm seeing. Thank you very much.
Is there any other public comment?
Yes, please. I believe these men want to speak. You need to be more assertive. Lift your hand up. Is that okay?
Yeah, just to your point around street trees, there's an organization called Relief Santa Rosa. There's a state organization, Petaluma has one, et cetera. And it would be good if the city would collaborate with them. Right now, we're planting trees at no cost to the city and no city support from the city's tree list. And I think when we look at trees, we take it for granted, but we need more education in the community about the benefits. It's not just beauty and shade. They capture carbon. They add to the hydrologic cycle. They keep the soil moist. And the fungi in the root system communicates with other trees in the community. So some of the problems with dying trees is sidewalk design. The basins aren't large enough, so the tree is starved. One example, if you go to the 5th Street parking lot, recently created a heat island there. They ripped out all the trees. The one remaining tree in the center, the tree well is just like 3 by 3 and it's pushing upward. And what the tree wants is moisture. So that's why it's pushing up everything around it to gain access to water. So larger basins, so we percolate water and enhance the soil vitality so these trees survive. And increasing diversity. If I look around the city, crepe myrtles are beautiful, but we can't just have crepe myrtles. We need to have diversity to attract different birds, insects, and our animal friends. So I think that's another piece when we consider what we put in as street trees is look at diversity. And to keep it short, one question I have for you is there collaboration with city schools and the parking division regarding trees? Because the 25 general plan is for the city. Do the city schools know about that? Does the parking division? Because that hasn't been my experience.
They can't answer you. There's no back and forth during public comment.
Oh, there isn't. Oh, okay. No wonder she was silent. Sorry about that. Well, that's a question I have, and it's really frustrating to engage as a community. We're a small group, and if you have a timer like you do on a webinar, everybody can have their say and not take 10 hours and do it respectfully. So it's frustrating for you, and it's really frustrating for us. And I want to thank you for reconvening the subcommittee because it hasn't been going on for months. And there are many people out there that are just frustrated and haven't shown up today because they have in the past and they've been canceled.
Thank you
So that's
so
my
much.
first.
Right. Hey, Michael, unfortunately, we're at the end of time,
Okay.
but what we can do is after the meeting, the staff, if they have a little time, can
Great.
chat with you, or you can come and talk with us individually. And we can have a little back and forth when we're no longer working under the Brown Act.
Mr. Knowles, you're next.
Mr. Knowles. I can conduct. the
Well,
meeting.
Mike took some of my
Thunder.
my talking points. So I'll apologize in advance for the kind of formality, but I did write something that I'll just read here that again, we'll feel maybe a little redundant, but hopefully will reaffirm some of what Mike has pointed out and what some others have pointed out too, and some other people who can't be here today. So I'm Derek Knowles. I've called Santa Rosa home now for 3 years, and I've grown to love the city. And I've tried to bring an enthusiasm for bottom-up, community-minded projects and small-scale native plant park restorations to my neighborhood in the JC, and also in my role as a recent appointee to the Community Advisory Board, and as well most recently to Santa Rosa's chapter of California Relief, a statewide organization that partners with local governments to enhance urban forests. Santa Rosa is a special place, and I want to do what I can to make sure it can continue to support a healthy ecosystem that we all depend on. But like many of us, I'm greatly concerned about its ability to do so in the accelerating threat of a climate crisis that grows worse and more severe every day, and with which we as Santa Rosans and Californians are intimately familiar. I'll just skip over, Mike and others have pointed out some of the dismay that we felt with just the lack of widespread tree canopy throughout Santa Rosa that has also impacted a lot of historically marginalized parts of the city. He also mentioned that the 5th and D Street lot and removal of 3 legacy redwoods by I believe the parking department that just inspired a lot of indignation, myself included, over the lack of sort of democratic spirit with which that seems to be, with which that took place, and the lack of community input with which those trees were removed. And they seem to me and others to sort of symbolize maybe the lack of conversation and reciprocity in determining how those decisions are made. So, trees are not a panacea to our problems, but they are a start, apart from serving as our best and most cost-effective carbon solutions, filtering pollutants, serving as wildlife havens, as has been noted, providing much needed shade. They and other nature-based solutions offer relatively low costs and long-lasting opportunities for real community enrichment and engagement. And I've seen those impacts firsthand in the work that we've started to do with Santa Rosa Relief, which has really just been a total grassroots creation at this point. It's been people like Mike, myself, and others who've got shovels in the ground and are doing what we can to complement the work of the city, who we understand have a lot of balls in the air and are doing their best. And so I think the message I'd like to promote today is if we could get maybe a line of dialogue or even a modest commitment from the city to help the work that's being undertaken by our chapter of Relief to improve tree canopy, to address environmental inequity, to conduct an assessment of the city's tree canopy, and an assortment of other things. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll speak also. I'll come up forward so I'm not talking behind people's backs. Never like that. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. I want to thank these folks for revitalizing the Relief program. 20 years ago, former mayor of Santa Rosa, Jane Bender, and her partner, Ellen Bailey, had a Relief program. She wrote it to be the mayor of Santa Rosa. So you can have these things be successful. So over in Roseland, we have a Relief chapter that's working with a group called Forest Unlimited. Forest Unlimited has been around for a long time. We do things over along the Roseland Creek, and we've been doing them for decades because we weren't in the city, wasn't really considered much of importance. But now for the last 7 years, we're in the city of Santa Rosa. We're hoping that Recreation and Parks Department will come to the Roseland Creek Park. We call it the neighborhood, because it has so many nice trees, and limb the trees up to higher than my height. The reason why? That keeps the homeless out. Right now, they use that Roseland Creek Park as their camping ground, and they don't take care of it. We actually have to come behind them and steward the spot and move out all the debris. The city recently, and we thank the city for this, brought in a 20-yard dumpster with a crew and heavy equipment and filled that dumpster. So this is really important. And we're hoping that as we look at the trees, we look at the idea that every time a tree comes down up there in Fountain Grove or over in near Galvin Park or all those areas where there's lots of trees and they need to mitigate, maybe they can plant over at our spot. Come over to the southwest. We're getting, and I do believe we will get more housing development than anywhere else in the city over the next few decades. So the more trees for us, the better. The thing about the trees lifting up the sidewalk, the property owner just cuts down his tree. He gets that notice, he's like, okay, bam, tree's gone. They do not repair the sidewalk. They still leave it for whatever kind of problem it was. And we can see that all over the place. Tree was just cut down on Montgomery Village across the street from my church on Montgomery Drive, excuse me. These types of things have been going on for a really long time. The city's understaffed. I was surprised when Ms. Santos said you got a huge crew that will go out and take out trees during the storms. Because for the most part, we don't have enough workers for all the stuff we need to do. And we don't have enough money, and we won't get any money from the regressives that are taking over the federal government. So we're gonna have to find ways to get the money from the state and also from foundations. The Arbor Foundation, Arbor Tree Foundation, all that good stuff. Arbor Day Foundation, it's called, excuse me. Anyway, you get the drift on it, never say die, keep trying to save trees, save nature. Come out to the neighborhood on Saturday, the 18th of April at 10 in the morning for our Earth Day event, which for the last 2 years, we've had the mayor of Santa Rosa and the city council members. It's been great. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, I'll bring it back for comments.
There's a
I just had
lady
a- I have
here.
just a quick question on why, I looked up a little bit about, oh, my name's Spring Maxfield. I'm the director of Santa Rosa Urban Arts, which is the nonprofit that is sponsoring Relief. So I'm very invested and I'm learning a lot. These guys know a lot more than I do, and Beth, who contributed via email and is on Zoom now. With the Inflation Reduction Act of last year, I feel like it was brought to the committee multiple times, and so many, I mean, there was what, $308 million allocated for tree canopy in California. I think San Francisco got 12 million, Petaluma got 1.5 million, Reading, I mean, they have trees up there, but they still got 5 million. Why we didn't have, I mean, it was money on the table that we passed up specifically for street canopy. In a city of our size, we could have gotten 5 or 6 million, I think. And you didn't have to know how you were going to spend it, just that you wanted to put that effort into street canopies. And I feel like that was such a wasted opportunity, especially for a city like ours that's underfunded and understaffed, to be able to, create a program.
Unfortunately, we can't answer.
I know,
in this
but I just wanted
context,
to,
But
we can talk later,
our
but-
staff can talk to you
Yeah.
after. Thank you for coming. Okay, so, thoughts?
Well, I think the reason why I kind of focused on this whole street tree impact is because my district, especially with older homes and historic homes, and just having finished a campaign where I walked those streets several times and often tripped because of the sidewalks. And I know this is common everywhere, but it is really dangerous. And I always had a concern because it does fall on the homeowner. And that's my concern, is that especially what Dwayne was just saying about, well, they just end up cutting it down, and then they don't deal with the sidewalk. And I know many, many years ago that it wasn't the homeowner's responsibility to take care of the sidewalk. maybe the tree and deal with the tree and call it in or do whatever they had to do, but not necessarily the sidewalk. But now that it is, I also know how expensive it is. And so I'm trying to think of other ways to address that. And I don't know what that is, but it is a concern because particularly in different parts of the city, we have a lot of young families now and they are walking, which is great. We want them to walk as much as they can with their kids, without their kids, whatever, with their dogs, with their animals. But you have these hazards everywhere. And at the same time, we're trying to preserve our trees. So I think that's one of my concerns. I also share Chair Fleming's concern about diseased trees. I've also seen that and seen, trees get diseased and have to be removed and, what we can do to combat that. So those are, and then also I didn't know about the Inflation Act. So, I mean, in terms of how that affected us, and I would love to hear if that is a possibility in terms of ways that we can address some of these issues. And I want to commend the Santa Rosa Relief for the work that you do and the knowledge that you have. I've just learned so much just sitting here listening to you today. So thank you.
Trump's taking the money back from inflation relief.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah, so,
You make me cry.
He makes me.
I agree with my colleague. What I will say is when this comes to council, I would like to see if there's a possibility for wildfire mitigation, specifically in areas that are affected by it. I don't know if that's the WUI or high fire severity zones, but I mean, what works in those zones is not necessarily, should not be, the same for areas that have no concern about wildfires or minimal concerns about wildfire. I think we should all have concerns about wildfire, but, and then, yeah, when it comes to street trees relief, that's great. One of my favorite memories as a kid growing up in this area is when we get out of junior high and high school to go count trees in the neighborhood. And literally just hours of walking down the street going 1, 2.
That was Slater Junior High?
Yes.
All right, see, I know.
And yeah, street trees, working with Relief, if there's a partnership opportunity there, anything like that to try to get more street trees. I agree, we don't need as many crepe myrtles. I'd throw Chinese pistache into that same conversation.
Yeah.
But I am a huge fan of the October Glory maples. Those are gorgeous. I think we should have more of those. So, but yeah, I agree with everything my colleague has said, and also I'd like to see some of that come back when it comes to full council.
Great. All really good comments. I couldn't agree with either of them more. I think it's really important to make sure that the policy fits the situation. So in particular, I want to throw my support behind making sure that our tree policy in the WUI is tailored to meet the needs of the emerging or the changing insurance landscape in a way that doesn't, unduly prevent our homeowners from complying with the requirements of their insurance agencies within reason. So, what I'm trying to say is that if the insurance companies come back and say you can't have a living thing on your property, it all has to be concreted over, come back to us for more guidance. We will then go to bat for that issue. But if it's not unreasonable, if it's, wanting some amount of clearance, let's help our homeowners comply without making it too punitive. In the flats where we have all these beautiful sidewalks, I know that house, I know that constituent, and I have real concerns about the sidewalk safety, but also making sure that it is ADA compliant. It's my understanding that in historic neighborhoods, there are somewhat different rules about sidewalk widths. And we do want to maintain historic character and meet ADA needs. What I'd say is that as we're starting to permit new neighborhoods, and we're starting to do buildings like the Fifth Street Garage, for example, those are opportunities to really look at our tree well design, and make sure that the tree wells are appropriately sized to the tree recommendations that we make at the city, and that we should make every effort to save trees within reason. And I kind of take a public health approach to it. So if you only have X amount of dollars, and we can't save every, tree. Not all trees are made equal. If we're gonna have the opportunity to save a redwood or a heritage oak or something else that's really sequestering a lot of carbon or really protecting our environment in a certain way, I'd like to see that. I'd also be willing to set aside some matching funds or some, minor amount of city funds that could help people to maybe meet their goals in these types of situations where we have like really large heritage redwood trees. I mean, if we lose that tree on 13th Street, that's gonna be big sad. That's something that we can't have happen. And I'll talk to the neighbors afterwards and we'll figure out what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen. And the city should be upfront with people about, if we have a sense of how much these things cost to do. But again, prevention is the key here. So if we can get to people before this happens and let them know, maybe their tree is not the right size for their situation. I know that we have a lot of guidance around street trees, but making sure that we have lots of supports for people on the front end. And making sure in particular that in Southwest Santa Rosa, where it is so much hotter than it is on the other side of the tracks, that we really, focus any efforts we can around our parks. In particular, where we can't easily spend funds and it's not, an issue of private property versus public property, that we make sure that we're investing heavily in the canopy in that part of our community.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we can conclude item 6.1 and move on to item 7. Who wants future agenda items?
So, yeah, I can speak to that, Chair Fleming. As you see, the attachment doesn't sparse in details about any future agenda items. We are awaiting your council goal setting session this month to potentially look at products. And at the same time, we'll be meeting internally with our staff department liaisons to provide an update on implementation of the municipal climate action plan and the community-wide climate action plan in the future. So more to come, and we will look forward to scheduling additional items.
Okay. Members of the community, future agenda items?
Yes,
What say
please.
you,
Yes.
Mr. DeWitt?
I'm gonna stand up here again. I had mentioned that Forest Unlimited, which is an organization based out of Forestville, has been helping us in Roseland on our Earth Day for a number of years. They have also been able to get funds together from activities that they do, and they want to do some neighborhood type activities, some tree planting things or something of that nature. So 4 years ago, I volunteered to be their urban forest person. And I know that at times people become a bit tired of my presence, but I do believe if we were able to get city staff to work with us through the urban forest effort of Forest Unlimited, we could bring in even more people to do all the things that have been talked about today at no cost to the city. Because we'll be fundraising and we'll make the efforts to get the seedlings. Right now, redwood seedlings are for sale, $2 a piece, Forest Unlimited out of Forestville. I'm not shilling for them, just letting everybody know. They do redwood plantings and they always have some left over and the city could buy some. Other people could buy them. Let's do more trees, please. That's my motto. Trees, please. You just didn't know that until today. Thank you.
Okey then, you good?
Yep.
Great. Item 8, adjournment. We are scheduled to meet the first, Wednesday of February, March. We're already in February. Today is the first Wednesday of February. The next one will be in March. We'll see you all then. Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
Thank you.